people of Reddit who have been abducted by aliens. What's your story? I was abducted outside my cousin's wedding reception. It's all very hazy. There were 2 of them and they carried these powerful hand torches. They kept shining in my face. They could speak a rudimentary form of English. They kept asking questions about how much I had been drinking. I presume because Earth is a water planet, they had questions about what we drank. Contrary to popular belief about anal probes, one of the aliens kept trying to make me put my pants on, not take them off, but I couldn't find my pants just then. The other alien kept talking about disturbing the other wedding guests and he tried to abduct my champagne bottle. Their spacecraft had a lot of bright lights on it, mostly red and blue. They took me to their mothership and put me in a holding area with some other humans they had also abducted that day. The next thing I know, it was morning and I was standing on the pavement downtown outside the police station. I was very fuzzy-headed, but physically unharmed. The whole experience gave me a terrible headache. Then I threw up on the bus. They took me in the middle of the night. I was out feeding the cattle under the moonlight and then a big light came over me. Next thing I knew, I was driving down the road talking to what I later realized was my father. Or the person whose body I am now in's father. He made a joke about the time being slow, and he had seen an episode of X-Files that mentioned that time reverses when aliens abduct so they can drop you off at the same time as they picked you up. Except I think they mixed something up because I am not in the same body I left in. I still remember my whole life before, but I am 18 years younger in this body, so I don't really mind. But a few years after the incident, I went to see if the farm I once lived on was still there, but it took me a while to get there without suspicion. It's gone. Like it never stood. I'm massively late to this thread, but I have a real story. When I was young, the neighborhood kids used to play dark hide and seek or dark capture the flag, often pretty late at night. Our parents were okay with it as long as we didn't leave the neighborhood. It was the early 90s. We were basically thrown out of the house on the weekends. Anyway, one night after the game was over and everyone had gone home, my stepsister and I were hanging out in our front yard, just sitting on one of those green cable boxes talking. At one point she stops talking and points into the sky and asks about a light in the sky. I turn and look and see it myself. The light was faint blue, and was brighter and bigger than the stairs around it. It was moving in ways that seemed impossible and it became aware we were looking at it as soon as I locked eyes on it. I don't know how to describe that. I know that, it was just this immediate feeling that it was looking right back at us. Suddenly, the light moved towards us almost in the blink of an eye. It went from being roughly double the size of a star in the sky to as bright as an airplane or helicopter searchlight instantly. There was no sound and the light didn't illuminate the surrounding area, which gave it a weird feeling. I tried to say something to my sister, but I found myself unable to speak and I could suddenly barely move. I just reneged, turning my head to see my sister looking very scared, also unable to speak or move. I thought I heard a noise and the light started shining on me, which made me turn my head back towards the object, and then I felt a piercing light basically blind me. I was like bathed in the blue light. After this things get a bit hazy, like I was meant to not remember it even though certain moments are as plain as any memory from that time. I was in a place that was mostly dark, but there were lights that seemed to hover by themselves, with no visible technology, pole etc. holding them up. I don't know if I was laying down or standing up because there was a feeling of no gravity or downward force in any direction. I remember interacting with an entity that was humanesque but seemed to be different, like a beautiful person, but they had no male or female characteristics, completely androgynous but with very symmetrical and smooth appearance to the face and body. Otherwise, very human looking. They talked to me, but I was acutely aware that it was in my head and not out loud. It was like moments of being conscious with moments of haziness in between. I don't know how to describe it. I was aware that they were doing things to me, but I don't remember what, but I do distinctly remember a piercing device they inserted just behind my ear on my right side. It went pretty deep, but it didn't hurt. It just felt almost itchy for a second, and they told me they were taking a sample and depositing something that would allow them to remotely monitor me for some time. They explained that this was not the first time they had done this to me specifically, and that they would continue to do so throughout my life, and that there were literally thousands of people they were doing this to. It was a scientific study of some kind that they tried to explain to me, but I honestly don't remember the purpose. I was able to ask them a few other things in the moments of being conscious, like where my sister was, and they explained she was having the same thing done to her. I asked them point blank if they were aliens, and they found it humorous and told me they were humans from the future, but I got the distinct feeling that this wasn't the truth. Again, I don't know how to describe why I thought this. It was just a different feeling when they told me this versus the other things they were saying. It felt like a lie or simplification of some kind. After some time of being out of it again, I became aware that my body was bathed in blue light again, and the darkness started to recede, and I was able to see the stars and the sky again. I don't know how long it was before I really understood where I was, but at some point I sorta came to and realized I was sitting on the grass, next to my sister, in the neighbor's yard about 50 to 60 feet from the original spot. My sister came to almost at the same time. We both immediately looked at each other and then to the sky, and the light was gone, but the sun was coming up. It was then we realized it had been hours. We didn't really talk about what happened, we just felt the need to go inside and go to bed before we got in trouble. It was years later before I ever spoke to my sister about that night, and she remembers much less than I do. She remembers seeing the light, being blinded by it, and then feeling weird, and then waking up beside me. To this day, she has explained it away by us seeing a helicopter in the sky and just falling asleep because we were tired. She won't discuss it beyond that. I honestly had forgotten about this event until 2 years ago when my wife mentioned that I had a spot behind my right ear that kinda looked like a burn mark or a scar, but also like a pimple or mole. She likes to pop things and was dying to let her try to pop it. When she reminded me of it, the memories of the event flooded back into my head and I was a bit emotional but agreed to let her mess with it. She tried to pop it but said nothing came out. It's still there and looks exactly as she describes it, kinda like a mole but also kinda like a scar. I've had MRIs and other scans throughout the years, but nothing has ever shown up, so I have no idea what it is or if anything is inside there. I try to not think of it now because although I wasn't scared at the time, it is unnerving to think about now. That's my story as honestly as I remember it. They were grey with big fat eyes, little mouths. They just stared while I peed. I don't think I was dealing with the top brass. I woke up, I had to pee like a camel. So, I started peeing and one of the grey aliens slapped the wall and pointed at the bowl. So I got the hint. I kind of duck walked over the bowl, peed in it. I had the shirt I came in with, but my pants were gone. So, my cuckoo was out. It's full Porky Pig in a drafty dome. I'm starting phase 2, which is me sitting on a stool while 40 grey aliens take turns gently batting my knockers. They were real respectful about it. They were in a line and then one by one, they'd step up, slap a knocker, and then go to the end of line and wait for another turn. It didn't hurt. It felt super off the books. I swear to God, there was one grey alien by a door just kind of peeking in and out. I think he was the lookout. Look, it's not one of my worst Wednesday nights. My grand exit was out of what was basically like a big airplane toilet, okay. I dropped down 7 feet on the roof of a Long John Silver's. They threw out my pants separately. They missed the roof. My slacks landed on a freaking pine tree, 30 feet away. So, I had to just chill up there with my damn cuckoo hanging till the place opened up. My brother-in-law says he was abducted. Don't know too much except he was out in the woods walking around. He was gone overnight. He never does that without letting somebody know that at least he's leaving. He was found the next morning completely stunned. On shock. He could barely talk. He never really said what happened. He won't talk about it. He said only that they performed examinations on him. His right foot now has what I can only describe as a birthmark on his right foot. It wasn't there before. That I know. It wasn't there. Now he's got a deep purple mark that covers most of his foot. WTF? It was around 3:50 a.m. I'm a night person, so I usually sleep around that time. It was starting to rain outside and there was a loud constant gust of wind blowing through the cracks near my window. It was eerie and I had a weird feeling that something bad was going to happen. I looked out the window and noticed nothing amiss except that the trees were swaying pretty violently and that one of the trees got uprooted. I turned back and saw 2 aliens by my door. They looked haggard and their backs were bent. They also did not have any limbs and their heads moved mechanically as though they were automatons. I noticed that the door was closed, so I presumed they had just walked through or teleported straight into my room. They were talking in some strange language that seemed to be half human and half alien, and the next thing I knew, I was being tied up in some giant opaque plastic bag. There were holes so I could breathe. Somehow I fell into a deep and peaceful trance. When I woke up I was in this foreign space. I could see through the holes in the plastic bag. It was as if I was in the sky and everything was floating. Then I heard footsteps. The ringleader, I presumed, came to inspect me. He unzipped the bag and the moment he saw my face, he lets out an audible, "You," and immediately zipped me back up. The next thing I knew I was back in my bed.